Hello everyone and welcome to the next video here in survey. So in this video we're going to be going into the details of those body regions we talked about in the last video, and then we'll be going into the different body cavities and the serous membrane. So let's jump right into it now. So here, the different body regions. These regions will help us understand how to name parts of the bones and the muscles and so forth. And then we have different body cavities. A cavity is a membrane housed area that's separate. It has a separate region to it, and usually these have what are called serous membranes around them. So we will talk about those as well today. All right, so first up here are those body regions. As you see here, there are quite a bit. Now, we're going to go through parts of these, and most of what I'll be talking about will be what's in parentheses in this image because that's typically the terms we use. So just working from the head and going the way down. So here, the frontal region, so that's where your frontal bone is in your skull, and also your frontal lobe. The head itself, or the skull, is the cranial region. So remember, we had caudal versus cranial earlier. So you have your cranial bones, and then you have your facial bones here of the face. Here, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more so you can see it a little better as we work our way through this image. And then eye is oculus or orbital or ocular. So that's the orbital cavity there of the eye. Mouth, oral. So that's the oral cavity is a muscle that goes around the mouth called the orbicularis oculi. Orbicularis oris. I meant to say the oculi goes around the eye. It's another circular muscle that goes around the eye, helps you blink. I'm really messing up this guy's face right now. Buccal, sometimes pronounced buccal, if you're in the dental work, is the cheek here. So you would have your buccal cells and so forth. There's a muscle in there called the buccinator or the buccinator. Again, some things are pronounced different ways in anatomy. Ear is the otic region. Nose is the nasal region. The neck, cervical region. And the chin here is the mental region. There's a muscle there called the mentalis muscle. There's two little holes on the jawbone or the mandible called the mental foramen. So they're mental. Now on the back, let me try to scroll over here if I can. I guess I'll just zoom out, and then where's my scroll bar? There we go. Now we can zoom over there. For some reason, I couldn't do that. Back of the, so head is also the cephalic, wherever you have a cluster of neurons, it's called cephalization. So ceph is head-like area. Also not shown in this image, I don't know why, we have occipital. Occipital is the back of the head. Right there is where you have the occipital lobe, occipital bone. Shoulder is acromial. On the scapula, you have the acromial process. On the clavicle, this is the acromial end of, or the acromion of the clavicle. So that anything going through that region is the acromial region. Armpit here is axillary, labeled over here on this image. So the axillary part of the armpit, you have your axillary nerve, axillary artery, axillary vein that run through there. Where your sternum is, that's the thoracic region. So you have your cervical vertebrae, you have your thoracic vertebrae, you have your lumbar vertebrae, and then you have your sacrum and then coccyx down there. So you have different regions going down the spine as well. Just the back is also known as the dorsal region. Let's continue down the arm now. So on the arm, you have then the brachial region, biceps brachii, coracobrachialis, radiobrachialis. You see a common term there of brachy or brachium, brachial, brachial artery, vein, and so forth there as well. And then antecubital right here is the anterior side of your elbow, and that's where you have a vein called the median cubital vein, common site of blood work. The back side of the elbow is called the olecranon. Your ulna has a process there called the olecranon process. There's also an indent in the humerus called the olecranon fossa. So here, knowing these regional terms help you name parts of the bones, which will be happening later on in the videos. So yes, there are a lot here, but if you start getting the naming down, it will help you. Forearm is an antebrachial. Wrist is the carpal region. So you have your carpals in there. Then you have your metacarpals. And then you have your palm region, and then the different fingers are the digits or the phalanges, and then the thumb is the pollex. We'll go down and look at the foot now because it's good to talk about the foot and the wrist at the same same time. Instead of carpal, now we have tarsal for the foot, and then you would have your metatarsals, and then you have your digits or phalanges down there. Big toe is then hallux. Hallux, oh, I'm blocking it, sorry. Hallux is your big toe there. Let's zoom back out and kind of try to reset this. Sorry, my scroll feature is not working. I think I have to click. And then, there we go. Now we can move back over to where we belong. Sorry about that. So if I was blocking stuff there, I apologize. Let's go back to drawing mode now. Alrighty, so back thoracic region and then abdominal region. We'll talk about the different cavities found in the dorsal and ventral cavities right here in the upper, in the trunk, in the head, and then belly button's umbilical region, and then you have the pelvic region, inguinal region, or the groin here. Sometimes you have the iliac region out here as well. That's where you have the ilium of your hip bones, and then pubic region as well, right here where the genitals are. And then on the back side, gluteal region. So gluteus maximus, medius minimus, the muscles back there. Going down the leg now has the femur or the femoral area. So here, let's zoom in just a little bit and see if we can get this a little better. So femoral region, same thing out here on this side. And then you get down to the kneecap. The patella or the patellar region, backside of the knee is the popliteus or popliteal region, and you have a popliteal artery and vein there as well. Calf is a sura or sural region, and this is also considered the leg down here. And this is the leg, and this is the thigh right here. So technically, when we think of leg, we think of the entire lower limb, but it's technically separated because here, crus or crural or leg is then located down here. And then your heel bone is your calcaneus or your calcaneal region. There's a tendon right there called your Achilles tendon that comes up and connects to your calf muscle, commonly referred to as the Achilles, but technically it's the calcaneal tendon. Bottom of your foot is the plantar region. So there's something called plantar fasciitis, which is an inflammation of the fascia down there. And then, yeah, so that's most of the regions here. And again, like I said, these regions come back when talking about the different bones and different muscles and things like that. So yes, there is a lot here, but they do come back and naming things in the future. All right. Next part here is we could talk about the various body cavities. So a cavity is an area that's separated from other parts of the body via membranes. So this is mainly only in the dorsal body cavity versus the ventral body cavity. Dorsal body cavity is made up of the cranial cavity and the vertebral cavity. So cranial cavity houses the brain, vertebral cavity houses the spinal cord. Now this is all connected here. So there's a similar fluid throughout it all called cerebral spinal fluid. So if you have something like meningitis and they need to check levels of certain things in your cerebral spinal fluid, they don't need to stick a needle into your skull in order to draw cerebral spinal fluid. They can do a lumbar puncture a lot further down where there's a lot less movement, a lot chance of severe damage if something goes wrong, and they're drawing the same fluid out down here than what would be up here because this fluid bathes this whole region. This region is also separated from the rest of the body via an extra layer of capillaries that we might talk about later. This term is called the blood-brain barrier. Excuse me. And then the ventral body cavity. So the ventral body cavity has two main parts to it. There's the thoracic component up here, and then there's the abdominal pelvic cavity down here. So the abdominal pelvic cavity is made up of the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. And then the thoracic cavity is made up of the two cavities that house each lung. So the pleural cavities, pleura is lungs, There's the superior mediastinum, and then within the mediastinum is what's called the pericardial cavity, which houses the heart. Now, one reason why these cavities exist is that these organs are organs that are moving a lot. Think of your heart pumping, think of your lungs expanding and contracting with every breath you take. That much movement can start building up friction if they're rubbing against something. So they do this thing where they can reduce that friction via something called serous membranes. And so I'll jump ahead here in the talk and skip over this image and just go over serous membranes quick. So the textbook gives a great analogy here of like sticking your fist into a balloon that's blown up, and imagine there's water in the balloon. So it's not super full, it doesn't pop. And when you stick your fist in that balloon, there's part of the balloon that is right on your fist. Imagine the fist as an organ like the heart here. So there's a membrane directly lining the heart. And then what we call our internal organs are known as our viscera. So that is the visceral membrane, or if it's directly on the heart, peri is around the heart, pericardium. So the visceral pericardium is a membrane directly around the heart, or just visceral membrane is the membrane that's on the viscera. Then there's a space. That space is filled with fluid. Here it's called the pericardial space or pericardial cavity, and there we have what's called serous fluid. So serous fluid is this lubricating fluid that prevents that buildup of friction. So when the heart is pumping up and down, that prevents that friction rub. And then there's an outer membrane, and something that means to form the walls of in Latin is parietal. You have two parietal bones on your skull forming the walls of your skull. So this is the parietal membrane forming, or in the heart, the parietal pericardium forming the outer layer of that membrane. So same thing with your lungs. There's a visceral membrane. You have the pleural space, and then you have the parietal membrane, and that helps your lungs kind of stick to your thoracic cage, and they can expand and contract as you breathe and help airflow moving in and out. Now, you can get inflammation in these regions. In the heart, it's called pericarditis. In the lungs, it's called pleurisy. In the abdomen, that also has these serous membranes, it's called peritonitis, and that can cause a pretty sharp stabbing pain from that inflammatory buildup in this serous space on these membranes. So those are important membranes to prevent that buildup of friction. Last thing to talk about here in the abdominopelvic region, we can separate that into quadrants first here. In these quadrants, this nomenclature is typically used, just diagnostic tools for saying where something hurts or something like that. So say I have right lower quadrant pain. Right down here, there's a structure called the appendix. So that could indicate maybe appendicitis or something going on in that region. Right upper quadrant, gallbladder is there. Liver is there. Left upper quadrant, there's where the stomach is. Left lower quadrant, mostly small intestines and so forth. But you have the kidneys are located back there on each side as well. So very, very important here in what's known as referred pain. People always ask, where does it hurt? And that's an important diagnostic tool. You can break that down then into 9 regions as well to get even more specific. There's the right and the left hypochondriac region. So understanding these root words is an important part in learning anatomy and physiology. You understand the parts of these words, you can break down that word pretty easily. Hypo means below. Chondro here, chondriac, is cartilage, and this is called the costal cartilage of the lungs. So this is talking about stuff below the costal cartilage on each side. Epi means upon. Gastric is stomach. So this is the region upon the stomach, which is located right there. Right and left lumbar region. Right there is where the lumbar vertebrae are located. So it's the right and left side. And then in the middle is where your belly button is. That's the umbilical region. And then below, remember, this was called the iliac crest, or that's the ilium of the hip. And so there's the right and left iliac region. Sometimes you can say inguinal region there as well, which we talked about up here. So inguinal. And then the last one is hypogastric. So hypo is below the stomach or below belly, typically what that means. So that's the hypogastric. Also, that can be sometimes known as the pubic region as well. So again, typically those are used for referred pain and trying to describe where something hurts. So that's all I have in this video here, going over serous membranes, the different cavities, and all these different body regions. Again, there's a lot here, but we will slowly go through these throughout the term, especially when we get to the skeletal system, and you'll see these terms back up. And hopefully you can start making associations with these regional terms to parts of the bone and things like that, so that it's not as much as memorization as it is forming associations with the regions on that bone and so forth. But that's all I have for today's video. Like always, let me know if you have any questions, but if not, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.